I thought it would be a bit fun to talk about my process of my new personal project instead of just creating a process reel, so this is it. I'm a big fan of history, and one of the time periods and series of events that really caught my attention a couple of years ago was the story about Genghis Khan. And through the podcast Hardcore History and documentaries, I started to learn about Genghis and his Mongolian army. I decided back in December that I wanted to do some sort of personal project around this. And another passion I have is title sequences, as a lot of motion designers do, so I thought why not mix the two passions and create a title sequence around Genghis Khan. So the first step I took was brushing up my knowledge around the topic, re-listened to the podcast, and then I kind of read a ton of articles, probably way more than I needed, but you know, it's an interesting topic, so don't judge me. I learned a bunch of new things around the topic and was starting to have a story in my head that could be like a story idea for a series or a movie. I wrote a small story premise, pause the video if you want to read it, and now that I had this premise, I had given myself boundaries. This made the process moving forward a lot easier. I've never created any real title sequence before. I did some research on that topic as well. Pretty limited information out there, or maybe I'm just bad at Googling. I think that's a real word. Probably. The amazing Clair have shared some very informal information in various articles I could find, and there were a couple of other very useful articles around the topic. I tried to keep those things in mind so I could practice this as if I had like a real client or an actual movie or series this should fit into. I then moved on to use the website cockle.it to create a mind map with keywords, themes and ideas. This process really helped me to put my first thoughts into reality, and it's here I feel like the universe I want to create start to really develop. In this case I ended up writing down a bit more loose ideas and objects that I thought could represent parts of the premise and help tell stories within the story. Part of my idea around the premise was going a bit into why Temujin, or Genghis Khan, turned out as he did. I speculated about how rough his childhood and upbringing might have played a huge role in that. Another reoccurring theme that you can read about in some articles was the idea that he wanted to change the places he conquered for the better. And this created sort of like a weird paradox. On the one hand he wanted to do good and unite, but the methods he was using wasn't exactly that. So I'm not sure I captured this exactly in my sequence, but it gave me a key sentence that I kept in mind along the way and in every scene: the brutality of unity. Okay, so after that I then wrote down ideas for specific scenes, and when I felt like I had enough to build out a sequence, I moved on to a mood board to sort of settle in on a style. I used this wonderful free tool called PureRef a fellow colleague of mine showed me, where you can easily throw in pictures and sort of just move them around and place them how you want them. After I was confident in the sort of style that I had in my mind and that the mood board or the reference pictures I found could really help me get, I proceeded to my 3D program of choice, which is Cinema 4D, where I basically just started from beginning and built out scene 1. I had an idea that I should try my best to have as few objects in the scene as possible and still be able to tell a story. Less is more, or so I've heard. I went through most of the scenes in a sort of chronological order, and I didn't animate anything before I had style frames of all the scenes that I was happy with. And when I had somewhat finished style frames for each scene, I then imported this into a timeline, or those pictures into a timeline in Premiere, and cut the music till I had around a minute that fit, and I cut the style frames so I had my timing and knew how long each scene should be. And because then I didn't have to render out frames that wouldn't be used, and since I'm sort of limited on render power, I really had to optimize. I wanted to point to parts of my premise in a chronological way, if that makes sense, so each scene either could tell a small story or added up to tell about an idea or a concept. Alright, so I want to go through the scenes quick and show a bit of my process and talk about my ideas and the concepts behind. The first scene here. In Genghis Khan's early life, he was actually held as a slave, and to tell that story I created the chains here in the first scene as he escaped slavery. I therefore have the blood, both as a way to show he fought his way out, and to say that he got a taste for blood early in his life. The water was sort of a way to symbolize that he was reborn, and the actual object that the chains are hanging on is a model of a baptismal font to sort of symbolize he is on his way to have a new name, Genghis Khan, from Temujin to Genghis Khan. And then I just worked on smaller details, creating materials and lighting until I had something that I was happy with. So the next couple of scenes are kind of telling parts of the same story that I was trying to tell. The first being with the bows and arrows. The bow is slowly being put together as the gold and leather are finishing the handle. And I wanted this to symbolize that he was gearing up and getting ready for the battle of a lifetime. Same reason why there is the leather in the background and arrowheads, things to build with. Which I might have blurred out a bit too much, I admit. But it's there and it sort of held the intention, at least for myself. So as with most of the scenes, I really focused my attention on the materials and lighting, as I did with this one, to really get in on the mood that I was looking for. Okay, so continuing on here with the next couple of scenes where the armor of the whole Genghis Khan sculpt created by the powerful tumen. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, because it's a great sculpt, and I got the sculpt without any shaders or UVs, which was a bit of a challenge, but it ended up being worth it for sure. As with the bow and arrow shots, these was about telling the story that he was getting ready for war. And for the sake of the art, these shots get a lot of time in the title, because I thought the sculpt was so good, and it really lifted up the video higher than I could have done on my own for sure. The armor didn't just have the symbolic meaning of war and battle. I thought it showed toughness and wealth with the gold, which was sort of an important themes to talk about, I felt like. Again, with the lighting for these shots, it was super important to really sell this feeling that I was looking for. And the materials also had to be on point with these close-up shots, which I'm pretty happy with most of the shaders in these ones. The good thing about having the model, using the same model in multiple shots, was that like once I had created it, I could basically just worked wherever I pointed the camera. Okay, moving on. This shot was one of my favorites, probably. It's supposed to show that now the army is marching to war, getting ready for battle. Sort of a simple shot in a technical aspect, but it's a pretty damn heavy scene. But I kind of just threw the model in a cloner and, you know, lighted the scene till I had something that looked neat. So kind of an easy scene to create, but I think it's powerful and I really like the look of it. This scene, I wanted the army to be sort of in the middle of the chaos, with their leader rising above, showing that he's part of the troops and a fearless leader. And as what war does, it leads to sacrifice and suffering. And I felt like it was an important factor both for the story premise, but also the magnitude of killing that went on in this time period. So from almost at the beginning of the project, I had this shot of black skulls stacking on top of each other, with arrows pointing out of the heads or the skulls. I had this in my mind from the beginning. I think the symbolism sort of speaks for itself in this one, brutality and destruction. I added the water again to symbolize rebirth, as the Mongolian army removed life, but in a brutal way made space for new. To get to that sentence in my head, the brutality of unity. The scenes of the roses was where that really came to life. The concept of burning down things to build them up again is what I really wanted to capture, as this new red rose comes out of a burning rose. Roses could also be a symbol for rebirth. Now getting to that last shot, I think it's kind of obvious where my thoughts were with this one. It's supposed to show the two sides, the good and the bad. The premise I described, someone from the Jin dynasty might have showed the great Khan that there was or is another way. I read in different articles that this Chinese prisoner Genghis freed ended up sort of being his right hand. But he had a different approach to the conquering, which some describe as this was where Genghis Khan developed his softer side. I tried to change the sculpt a bit on the face to have one side look more angry and the other one more soft or more, I guess, human. The colors obviously help with that, but I tried to remove almost all the reflection from the angry side, in the red side to put extra light and reflection on the light and more soft side. Because I've heard different places that the eye is sort of the soul into the human. I was trying to make him look more human on the one side and less on the other. I don't know if it worked, but at least that was my intention, and that was again sort of the feeling I was trying to get from this scene. So as for like just a small fun note here coming to an end, all the names that were put in there, most of them anyway, was created with a Mongolian name generator or an American name generator. Because I wanted this to seem a bit more real, so the Mongolian names could be like the actors on the set, and it could be like an American production. That's why I have the American names as well. And just like a small Easter egg I put in there was Temujin Baikal. I think Baikal. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but I think that was Temujin was Genghis Khan's name, and Baikal, whatever, was the city he grew up in. Was born in, I think. Alright, so coming to an end on this process, I really enjoyed creating these titles. A lot of work went into it, not just the technical, but also the research and development. It took a lot of time, but I really enjoyed creating something like this. It's a lot of fun, and I can only recommend that people try to jump into a project like this. And I hope that my video of this process at least gave you some idea of how you can maybe do this on your own. This was sort of my intention with the video, to put some boundaries around how my process was and how I did it. It's not like the right way, because as I said earlier, I've never done anything official, so I'm not an expert in any way, but I hope you found some of it interesting and maybe learned a thing or two. And thanks for watching. Bye bye.